In the spring of 633 AD, a military commander crosses the Arabian Desert into the territory of the Sassanid Persian Empire with an army of 18,000 men and no supply line. He carries no grain wagons, no siege train, no logistical infrastructure of the kind that the great imperial armies of Byzantium and Persia consider the minimum requirement for any serious military campaign. What he carries is speed, the disciplined aggression of an army that has been fighting continuously for 2 years, and a tactical intelligence that will, over the following 5 years, destroy 2 of the largest empires in the world. His name is Khalid ibn al-Walid, and he is already, at the moment he crosses into Persian territory, the most successful battlefield commander alive. He has fought in over 100 engagements. He has never lost one. The Prophet Muhammad, who gave him the title Sayf Allah, the sword of God, is already dead, and Khalid is fighting in the service of the caliphate that succeeds him. He will fight for 5 more years, across 2 fronts separated by 1,000 miles of desert, winning every engagement he commands, before being removed from command by a caliph who fears that his soldiers have begun to attribute the victories to the general rather than to God. The story of Khalid ibn al-Walid is not, at its deepest level, a story about individual military genius, though the genius is real and extraordinary. It is a story about what happens when a new, highly motivated military force arrives at the precise historical moment when the 2 empires it faces have exhausted themselves fighting each other. The Byzantine-Sassanid War of 602 to 628 AD is the longest and most destructive conflict between the 2 great powers of the ancient world. A 26-year struggle that strips both empires of their treasury reserves, depopulates their frontier provinces, exhausts their military manpower, and leaves their tax-paying populations so thoroughly wrung out that neither empire can mount the kind of sustained territorial defense that might have stopped what is coming. Khalid doesn't defeat 2 strong empires. He defeats 2 empires that are, at the moment he meets them, already broken. The question is not whether he wins. The question is, how fast? Khalid is born sometime around 585 AD into the Makhzum clan of the Quraysh tribe in Mecca, one of the most prestigious military lineages in Arabia, a family whose men have led tribal armies for generations, and whose social position rests on precisely the combination of martial excellence and commercial acumen that defines the Meccan aristocracy. He fights against the early Muslim community at the Battle of Uhud in 625, commanding the Meccan cavalry in a flanking maneuver that breaks the Muslim formation and nearly kills Muhammad himself, demonstrating, in his first documented battlefield performance, the aggressive exploitation of cavalry mobility that will define his tactical approach for the rest of his career. He converts to Islam in 627 or 628, drawn by a combination of religious conviction and the political reality that Mecca's resistance to the growing Muslim polity is becoming untenable. Whatever the balance of motivations, the conversion is genuine enough that he commits himself to the new faith with the same totality he has previously brought to opposing it. He participates in the conquest of Mecca in 630 and the subsequent campaigns that consolidate Muslim authority over the Arabian Peninsula, demonstrating in these early operations the qualities that will make him exceptional: speed of movement, the ability to read terrain and enemy formation in real time, and an aggressive pursuit after victory that converts battlefield success into strategic elimination of the defeated force rather than allowing it to retreat and regroup. When Muhammad dies in 632 and the Arabian Peninsula immediately fractures in the Ridda, the wars of apostasy, in which numerous tribes that had submitted to Islamic authority under Muhammad's personal presence repudiate that submission and must be brought back by force. It is Khalid who conducts the most demanding campaigns of the reconsolidation. The Ridda Wars are not single battles, but sustained counterinsurgency operations across vast distances of desert, requiring the ability to move faster than the rebellion can organize and to strike before the apostasy spreads to neighboring tribes. Khalid covers distances in days that his opponents assume will take weeks, appearing at engagements his enemies did not believe he could reach in time, and winning through the combination of surprise, speed, and the particular ferocity of a force fighting to prevent the dissolution of the political community it has just built. The economic logic of Khalid's campaigns is inseparable from their military character, and it begins with the most fundamental question of desert warfare: supply. An army moving through Arabia cannot carry enough food and water to sustain itself across the distances required to catch and engage dispersed opposition. It must live off the territory it moves through, which means it must move fast enough that it reaches each new source of supply before the previous one is exhausted, and it must win its engagements decisively enough that it can exploit the enemy's supply rather than depending entirely on its own. An army that wins slowly, that allows defeated enemies to destroy their supplies and retreat with their livestock, starves. An army that wins fast, that catches its opponents before they can implement a scorched earth withdrawal, eats what its opponents were eating an hour before. This logic drives the tempo of Khalid's operations throughout the Ridda and into the Persian campaigns that follow. His movement rates are extraordinary by the standards of ancient and medieval warfare. March rates that contemporary sources describe in terms that scholars have sometimes doubted until the logic of desert supply becomes clear. An army traveling slowly through the desert consumes more of its own supplies per mile covered than an army traveling quickly. Speed is not merely a tactical advantage, it is a logistical necessity. The army that moves fast enough maintains its supply chain. The army that moves too slowly dies of thirst before it reaches the battle. The invasion of Persian Iraq in 633 opens against the buffer territories that the Sassanid Empire administers through Arab client kingdoms, the Lakhmid tribal confederacy, which has been Rome's and then Persia's proxy military force on the Arabian frontier for generations. The Lakhmids are not a negligible force, but they are also not the Sassanid imperial army, and Khalid defeats them in rapid succession at the Battles of Chains, named for the Persian infantry's practice of chaining themselves together to prevent retreat, and at Walajah, where Khalid employs for the first time the tactical formation he will use repeatedly: a frontal engagement to fix the enemy's attention, while concealed cavalry units execute a double envelopment, appearing on both flanks simultaneously and converting a conventional engagement into a surrounding action from which organized retreat is impossible. The Battle of Ulais, which the Arab sources call the River of Blood, is the most brutal of the Iraqi campaign's early engagements. Khalid reportedly vows before the battle to make the nearby river run with enemy blood, if God grants him victory. And the aftermath of the engagement is conducted with a thoroughness that transforms what might have been a tactical victory into a strategic elimination. Prisoners are executed in such numbers that the drainage from the battlefield site reportedly stains the irrigation channels of the surrounding agricultural district. The brutality is not random. It is deliberate deterrence, designed to communicate to the Sassanid provincial administration that resistance to the advancing Muslim force will not result in the usual outcome of ancient warfare: defeat, ransom, and eventual return to normal life, but in elimination. The calculation works. Several Persian-administered cities in the Euphrates Valley open their gates rather than resist. The city of Hira, the former Lakhmid capital and the most important urban center in lower Iraq, falls without significant resistance, its Christian Arab population negotiating a surrender agreement that preserves their religious practice and their property in exchange for a payment that functions as the first formal implementation of the dhimmi system. Non-Muslim populations under Muslim political authority paying a tax, the jizya, in exchange for protection and the right to practice their faith. The administrative logic of the jizya is important. It gives conquered populations an economic incentive to accept Muslim political authority without converting, and it gives the Muslim state a revenue stream from its non-Muslim subjects. It is, among other things, a sophisticated piece of fiscal policy applied to military conquest, converting the zero-sum logic of plunder into the positive-sum logic of taxable productivity. Khalid has been in Iraq for less than a year when he receives orders from Caliph Abu Bakr to transfer a portion of his force to Syria, where 3 separate Muslim armies are struggling against the Byzantine military response to the first probing invasions of the Levantine provinces. The order requires Khalid to cross the Syrian Desert, not the cultivated Euphrates Valley through which his Iraqi campaign has been moving, but the true desert, the basalt and sand wilderness between the Euphrates and the settled agricultural zone of Syria, a crossing that Byzantine military planners consider essentially impossible for a significant military force. The water sources along the most direct route are widely spaced, the terrain is brutal, and the summer heat is at its worst. Khalid crosses in 18 days. The crossing requires detailed knowledge of every water source along the route, the kind of geographic intelligence that Bedouin guides who have traversed the desert for generations can provide, but that no conventional military staff can generate. It requires precise calculation of the water consumption of men and animals against the distances between sources, rationing strict enough to ensure that every animal and every soldier arrives at each water point with enough reserves to reach the next one. It requires speed because a slower crossing consumes more water per mile and cannot work on the available supply. And it requires the confidence, or the desperate necessity, to commit an army to a course of action from which there is no return once the last reliable water source is left behind. The force Khalid arrives with in Syria is reduced by the crossing, but intact, and its appearance on the Byzantine flank is the psychological shock that transforms a stalemate into a crisis. The 3 Muslim armies that have been operating in Syria consolidate under Khalid's command, and the combined force achieves the first significant victory against Byzantine regular forces at Ajnadayn in July 634. A battle that opens the road to Damascus and demonstrates that the Byzantine military response to the Muslim invasion of Syria is insufficient. Damascus falls in 635 after a siege whose most revealing feature is the manner of its conclusion. The city's military commander negotiates a surrender with Khalid's forces that preserves the civilian population and their property in exchange for submission, while the city's bishop simultaneously negotiates a separate surrender with a different Muslim commander. The 2 agreements together providing the legal and theological cover that allows the city's diverse religious communities to accept Muslim authority without the destruction that military resistance would have invited. The administrative sophistication of the conquest, its ability to work through existing local institutions and accommodate existing religious communities rather than imposing a single uniform system by force, is part of what makes it durable. The Battle of Yarmouk in August 636 is the decisive engagement of the Syrian campaign and one of the most consequential battles in the history of the ancient world. The Byzantine Emperor Heraclius, who had spent the preceding 2 decades fighting the Sassanids and had only recovered the lost eastern provinces in 628, assembles a force that contemporary sources estimate at between 80 and 100,000 men. The largest Byzantine army deployed in a generation, drawn from across the empire's remaining military resources, supplemented by Arab Christian allies from the Ghassanid client kingdom. and commanded by officers who represent the full professional depth of the Byzantine military establishment. What those officers encounter at Yarmouk is an enemy whose tactical approach they have not fully prepared for. Khalid deploys his force in a formation that abandons the conventional ancient battle line in favor of a flexible mobile reserve that can be committed to whichever point of the engagement is under the greatest pressure. An innovation that allows him to manage a 6-day battle across a wide front without the catastrophic local collapses that conventional ancient formations suffer when a section of the line gives way. The Byzantine cavalry, which achieves local breakthroughs on several occasions, finds that each breakthrough is met by the mobile reserve rather than by open flanks leading to the rear. The Muslim infantry, fighting with the particular intensity of men who believe death in battle is not a loss, but a transition, holds its ground under conditions that would have broken less motivated forces. The battle turns decisively on the 6th day, when a sandstorm blows from the east into the Byzantine lines, an environmental factor that Khalid's positioning has anticipated and the Byzantine commanders have not compensated for. The Muslim force, fighting with the storm at their backs and the sun and sand in the enemy's faces, launches the coordinated assault that breaks the Byzantine formation. The defeat is total. The Byzantine army does not retreat in order. It dissolves, its Arab Christian allies defecting during the engagement, its surviving imperial units pursued by Khalid's cavalry with the same relentless efficiency that had characterized every pursuit of his career. Heraclius, receiving the news at Antioch, reportedly turns towards Syria as he departs northward and addresses the province he is abandoning. Farewell, Syria, and what an excellent country this is for the enemy. Yarmouk ends Byzantine military power in Syria permanently. There is no Byzantine recovery, no second army, no attempt to retake the Levantine provinces. The treasury that the 26-year war against Persia has emptied cannot fund a second major campaign, and the political situation in Constantinople, the succession disputes, the theological conflicts over Chalcedonian orthodoxy that have alienated the monophysite Christian populations of Syria and Egypt, the general exhaustion of an empire that has been fighting for a generation, makes the mobilization of another great army politically impossible, even if the money existed. Khalid doesn't command at the parallel conquest of Persia, which is conducted by other Muslim commanders and culminates at the Battle of Qadisiyah in 636 and the fall of the Sassanid capital Ctesiphon in 637. But the Persian collapse follows the same logic as the Byzantine one. An empire whose military capacity has been exhausted by decades of conflict with Byzantium, whose provincial populations have no particular loyalty to a Zoroastrian imperial administration that has taxed and conscripted them without providing security, and whose treasury cannot sustain the prolonged defensive war that containing the Muslim advance requires. Caliph Umar removes Khalid from command in 638, at the height of his military success, replacing him with Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah as supreme commander in Syria. The reasons are political rather than military. Khalid's soldiers have developed a personal loyalty to him that Umar considers dangerous, an army that fights for its general rather than for God, and the caliphate is an army that can be used against God and the caliphate. And Umar has watched enough of pre-Islamic Arabian history to understand what personal military charisma combined with a winning army can produce. The removal is conducted not as a disgrace, but as a reassignment, and Khalid accepts it with the same discipline he has brought to every other military situation, continuing to fight as a subordinate commander until his death around 642. He dies, reportedly, in bed, a fact that he himself finds unsatisfactory, having spent his entire adult life on campaign and having survived over 100 engagements without serious injury. His body, according to the tradition that surrounds his death, bears the marks of every weapon that exists. Scars from swords, spears, arrows, and every other instrument of the warfare he practiced for 20 years. That none of those weapons killed him, and that the most successful battlefield commander of his era dies in domestic obscurity rather than in the heroic circumstances his career seemed to promise, is one of the more ironic punctuations in the history of military achievement. What Khalid ibn al-Walid demonstrates across his 5 years of continuous campaigning is a principle that military history confirms in every era. That tactical genius operates within strategic conditions it does not create, and that the most extraordinary battlefield performance in the world cannot by itself explain why some conquests succeed and others fail. Khalid wins every battle he fights, but he wins them against opponents whose capacity to replace battlefield losses, to fund new armies, to maintain the administrative and fiscal infrastructure of sustained military resistance, has already been destroyed by a quarter-century of exhausting conflict that Khalid had nothing to do with. The sword of God cuts deep, but it cuts through empires that are already bleeding out.